Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. I'm Chris Province.
And I'm Luke Freeman, and today we're really excited to be doing a special episode with Kelley Francen and April Carter of Citizen Potawatomi Nation. And we had the opportunity to do a really fun project working in partnership with them to do a Citizen Potawatomi specific leadership development program. And I think today we're excited to learn some lessons from, what prompted the project from you all's perspectives, what were some challenges, and then what are some key takeaways. And I think for me, the why of this today is because everyone's always asking, how do we make our values really stick? How do we make what we believe about working here, being a part of the community, especially in tribal organizations, being a part of a tribal enterprise or tribal government? How do we decrease the gap between why we exist as a nation and the work that people are doing every day? And I feel like you all have been really inspirational to us and our team and how you think about that. So let's do some quick introductions. So Kelley, jump in, tell us your role, how long you've been with Citizen Potawatomi, and and maybe we'll just start out big here. What's your why whenever you wake up in the morning? We won't hold back. We won't go slow. We'll just jump in there.
Absolutely, yes. So I've been with the tribe just almost 19 years. My why 19 years ago was just because I needed a job.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for a very small nonprofit. They were dissolving and I needed a job. And so quickly I found working for the tribe, Citizen Potawatomi Nation, I just found a family, a network of people. I worked for a network of people.
Mm-hmm.
And very quickly I began to believe in the culture of the tribe and what the tribe stood for. So I started in human resources just as a recruiter as we were opening up our grand casino. Quickly moved into a training management position and did a lot of leadership and management training with our casino folks.
Mm-hmm.
Moved around a few times, moved into economic development as the assistant director, working on the workforce piece of that. Moved over into our tax commission and put some framework around the tribe's retail tax. And then was approached by Vice Chair Linda Capps to start up the new Department of Employee Engagement.
That's amazing. And give us a quick overview. When you say Department of Employee Engagement, I'm going to guess a lot of people are like, well, that's kind of Fortune 500. There's maybe a few people working on employee engagement in really large organizations. How do you think about it? And tell us a little bit about your workforce, maybe how big it is and how you all fit as a Office of Employee Engagement with this size workforce.
Sure. We're a new department, this starting our third year, so we're still kind of feeling our way through some things, trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
But the tribe has about 2,200 employees,
Mm-hmm.
and we're so diverse in our enterprises. So, we have housekeepers all the way up to the CFOs of our accounting, so very diverse in what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so primarily, I think I'm charged with the responsibility to make sure that our employees enjoy their work here, that they're feeling valued and appreciated and safe.
Yeah. Oh, I love that last one, safe,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That they're really the table stakes for keeping people and keeping
Mm-hmm.
the best people.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, April, how about you?
Well, I started working for the tribe I've been with them off and on throughout my younger years. And my why was that I needed a job. The tribe had supported me through my education, giving me scholarships. So I thought naturally I need to go and work for them in some capacity to give back. So I applied at the tag office and kind of worked my way up. I started as the scanning clerk, and as they saw the skills that I had, I worked into the supervisor role there and supervised a group of 5 very amazing tag ladies that taught me a lot of things. One of the things they taught me was how to show up authentically myself, and that was okay. And then I met Kelley as we were working with an employee who was kind of experiencing a little bit of a hiccup in the workplace. So she came on board and we thought up some different strategies on how to help this person. That worked itself out. And then all of a sudden, I received an email from Kelley about wanting to employee develop me.
Yes, yes. One of the components of the employee engagement department is advocacy.
Mhm.
And, we want all of our employees to enjoy success here with CPN. And so if an employee's having a hiccup, whether it be I don't understand my job expectations, I'm having conflict with a coworker, or maybe it's on a personal note, I've got a chronically ill child, I can't get to work on time every day. How do I navigate through this? So, working with the employee engagement department and the employee advocate, we can help navigate those waters and come up
Yeah.
with strategies to help either figure out a better schedule for that employee. We can work with the managers, the directors, or if it's a work related thing, help someone to just get the skills that they need, the conflict resolution skills, or back up and let's do some retraining. And so that's how I met April. There was an employee at the tag office that was experiencing, like April said, that hiccup. So we started working together, April as the supervisor, and April was beautiful in coming up with strategies. How can I back up and help this employee? What can I do to save this employee? And through that process, I heard that she had just finished up her degree in organizational leadership from OU. She was a tribal member, everything just aligned. But more than those two things, I think it's just the way April is willing to approach a problem and the extent she's willing to go to help an employee find that success.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, Chris, I want to go to you because before we were even done with this project, which we work with a lot of tribal nations doing leadership development work, and a lot of other non-tribal organizations. We've made custom things before, but I remember, we were maybe halfway through it and you were just like, this is awesome. This is exactly how it's supposed to work. We got to do a podcast. Like, we got to capture this. We have to understand some of the magic of this project. So why this one? What's special about maybe this group,
Yeah.
Kelley and April, maybe about this specific project? Why is this an episode today?
Yeah, well, I remember, I think we originally met, I was with Oklahoma Ethics doing the Why People Lie, Cheat, and Steal and that delivery, and they happened to be there that day. And I think there were maybe some through lines in there that resonated around values and how when we activate values, bad things are less likely to happen. And we started pulling thread on this idea of, hey, we're really wanting to take our tribal values and do something with those. And immediately, yes, absolutely. Because when we think about leadership development, there is nothing more authentic than something that is not just culturally appropriate, but the values that create the culture. And the stories handed down for generations that is shared amongst not just Citizen Potawatomi Nation, but all Ojibwe people. And the importance of these values to the culture, the sustainability, and the vibrance of this tribal community. It's a different approach to leadership development because it's not third party. It's not us coming in and saying, this is what you should value, because we know there are virtues and values that are universal that speak across cultures and languages, but it's not as authentic as when it is born from within the organization and within that culture specifically. So when we were invited, and honored to say, hey, here's what we believe. Can you help us with exercises that can activate these things within our organization? And it does have a lot to do with the work team, right? It was wonderful to work with Kelley and April, their cultural team, and what they curate and the stories that they hold, and the language department and what they bring to something like this. So you get artifacts and story and language and values. And it was this awesome mesh of something that is really organic and, local, put and just combined and dovetailed with empirical research and data and best practices. And it was this just really awesome blend. What we know in science works and what is believed by people.
Hmm.
And it aligns in such a way that it's just really powerful. And when you think about things like, getting to spend time digging into what we believe, I mean, as a collective team, we got to dig into what we believed about love and truth and bravery and what it means to, like, how to live honestly and how do we show respect and ultimately become like more wise. How do we make better decisions as an organization by leaning into values? Like, that's the stuff I want to do,
Yeah.
and thinking about, I do want to kind of holler back to this idea that, like, and someone was visionary enough to stand up to the department
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
say, like, we want to advocate for our employees. Because I think about the organizations that don't have this function, where it's just, hey, that's the leader's problem, or that's that employee's problem. And really, they just end up turning over or leaving because they're not being developed, or it's like there's a lot of things unseen when a really explicit employee engagement effort isn't in play. So I'm super interested when Ms. Capps kind of brought this idea to you to say, hey, I've got this thought about really being explicit about how we advocate, develop, and retain team members. Can you share with me a little bit how that conversation went?
Mm-hmm. I can, yes. Um, and oddly enough, the idea kind of stemmed from the NOAC alumni groups from the years past. But years ago, we had a department called Job Pride. And Job Pride would do quarterly trainings with all of our enterprises, and they would be like pump you up, feel good training. And that department dissolved for whatever reason, and so for years there was nothing. There was no pulse on what's happening with our employees. So again, out of NOAC, it surfaced. We need that. We need a job pride ish department back. And that's kind of when my name surfaced, and I had a conversation with Mrs. Capps and said I would love to tackle that. And here's some of the things I would like to do. I'd like it to be more than just pump you up and make you feel good. I'd like to have a little more meat in that, like how do we do those things?
Hmm.
And fortunately, she was on board, and just one idea at a time is kind of how it evolved.
Yeah, so let's kind of dive into that idea of NOAC for a minute. That was the legacy program. Am I correct with that?
Hmm.
And can you just kind of share what the intentions were of that program originally?
Sure, absolutely. So NOAC started about 2013, 2014, and we've had it every year. And it started out really you take a group of people who are already in leadership positions, and you teach them about tribes. You teach them the history, and you educate them on sovereignty and what all those pieces mean. So you're taking a deep dive into just the Native American world, if you will. And then you learn about each of the CPN industries or enterprises along that process. And so, for whatever reason, an employee would leave and then another would leave. And so the program just was kind of losing, there was nobody that had their arms wrapped around it tightly to keep it going and to change some of the framework. And I think, Chris, you used the example, it was like a copy of a copy of a copy. So it was getting
Mm.
watered down.
Mhm.
And so I approached Mrs. Capps and just asked her, hey, I would love to get my hands on this. And here's some of my thoughts on that. What do you think? And she's like, I love it. I love it.
That's awesome. And I think that's a great example of like how time can work for us or against us,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just sometimes taking that step back to clean up the things that need cleaned up. I think it works for programs. I think it works for organizations. It works in my personal life. It works for my family, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we just sometimes just have to take a step back and
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, there's a couple decisions or things we've taken our eye away from over time, and let's refocus, let's retrain our eyes and the energy and get something really positive going. So April, when for this version, it's not only about learning the the Citizen Potawatomi Nation industries and tribal culture. There's language components and these tribal values. Specifically, tribal values have been passed down from generations. Can you share a little bit about kind of the basis of the values for the tribe and the stories that we're trying to learn and how those
Sure.
arrive to us?
So, the story that we use in our leadership program is the seven teachings. And it starts with Creator looking down, and he sees that people are living life in a bad way and ultimately kind of wants to destroy people, but decides that maybe there's someone out there who they might be able to take and teach these seven gifts so that they can go back out and teach the people to live in a good way. So they do find a child, they take him to the spirit world, and they think, maybe he's a little bit too young, so we need him to go on this journey. And on this journey, that's where he learns about love. That's where he learns about truth, bravery, respect, honesty, humility, and ultimately wisdom. And he goes back to his family and back to the people, and he teaches them these seven gifts. But ultimately, you have to know that these gifts also come with the flip side. And that flip side is that you have to use all of these gifts together. You can't use one without the other. And that is what our leadership program is based on, is those seven values.
Yeah, I love that. And I know whenever we first got in conversation together, that was the ask, right? How do we activate these seven pieces of wisdom into leadership training? But before we jump into that, my next question is like, what sparked that, and we'll really get into the program. I just want to, for listeners, draw a quick parallel here. If you are watching on YouTube, you can see we're in the Citizen Potawatomi Cultural Center. What's really cool, right? If you're just listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, go check out YouTube. It's a really cool place where we get to record today. But for everyone listening inside an organization, there are values. Maybe you haven't excavated them. Maybe you haven't put words on them or not, but they exist. They're there. I want to go completely opposite end of the spectrum here and say, if you go to Bentonville, Arkansas, and you go downtown on the square, there is a Walmart museum with Sam Walton's original truck, who was the founder of Walmart. And you go in and there's all of these pieces of artifacts of the history of that organization, right? And that's a baby organization compared to a tribal nation, right? And all of the cultural anthropology and artifacts that we have, all the history that there is. And so the point is, you can take those values and activate them through intentional programs and training, through intentional people practices, policy, right? And that's what good people departments do, whether it's an office of employee engagement or HR or organizational development, or just a wise senior leader. That's what they do, is they say, we believe these things. What do I have to do to keep activating them so they're more and more tangible for our new hires? They're more and more real for the people who have been here for a long time. So I want to draw that connection. This is applicable to anybody. Okay, so let's rewind. Like, when did you know that the NOAC program needed a refresh? Was there something that sparked it? Was this just a drive from you internally?
Mm-hmm.
And like, what got you over the hump to say, like, let's do this?
Mm-hmm. So I think it was an internal drive. Oddly enough, years ago when I worked in HR, I had sketched out a program much like NOAC looks today. And, sometimes timing has to be right. And I presented that to the HR director. No, we're not going to go there. So I just sat on it, and then years go by and NOAC starts under Dr. Kelley Mosteller, and it was a beautiful program. We,
Mhm.
enjoyed much success. And then we started experiencing, Kelley left, and then Jennifer Bell was another one instrumental. Tasia Zentek, they left. And that's when the program kind of started getting watered down.
Mhm.
And I would watch it, because I went through NOAC one of the first 1 or 2 years, and I watched it just get diluted. I'm like, no, there's so much there and more. And I went back to my little yellow folder that had the program all sketched out. I'm like, this can happen. This can happen. So I talked again to Mrs. Capps about it, and she said, "Yeah, let's see what we can do with that." And I knew I wanted to keep the history and the culture and learning about sovereignty and all those things, because those are very important pieces to know when you're a leader with a
Hmm.
nation, within the tribe. And I think new leaders needed to know about the enterprises. What do they look like and how do they fit into the sovereignty and the bigger picture of things? But the piece that was missing was the leadership piece. How do I lead? How do I take these 7 gifts
Mm.
and learn to lead myself with them and then push them out in the world? And that was the missing piece. I could struggle and come up with some things, but I wanted a real big bite to it, and that's when I met Chris, and I'm like, "Uh-huh, there's that
Mm,
bite."
Yeah. And it's just so like the things that we're talking about incorporating it into leadership development in this case, they're so authentic. And here you have an organization that says, we want to promote these values and we want our leaders to live this way. So when you say we want our leaders to lead with love and not only be wise, but share information and develop understanding so everyone else can be wise around them, and to live honestly and show up with their personal values in tow. Like when you start talking about like this is how we want CPN leaders to live, it's an it becomes a passion project in short order. And you know, that first step in leadership, like first learn to lead yourself before we worry about leading teams, before we worry about leading leaders or leading organizations. First learn to lead myself. And if I'm going to learn that, these are the types of values that ring true because they're authentic. It's not MBA speak. It's like things that forge communities. So, from there, it was just about putting pieces together. There was a lot of logistics and how do we figure out, where does the science go and where does the language go, right?
Mhm.
And different scheduling components. But, yeah, that's what made me jump out of bed and jump on board.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier connecting with different parts of history and like what are these 7 pieces of wisdom about? What are these 7 gifts? So tell me a little bit about that process, that excavating. Was that talking to tribal historians? Was that talking to elders, leaders? And how did we really define and get the right words for each of these 7 gifts?
Well, the words were already in place,
Yeah.
Right. The
through the
titles. Yeah.
story
Yeah.
through the
Right.
story, yes.
Mhm.
And so, how did we define the meaning of what we wanted it to look like
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
I don't know that there was any formal process that we used to do that. I think we just kind of intuitively knew what we thought. I know what I
Mm-hmm.
think bravery looks like in the workforce, and
Uh-huh.
how you would, exhibit that and show that. Um, and then working along with Chris and you, Luke, and the rest of the crew, it just kind of brought it to life.
Yeah, I mean, some things like, well, since you mentioned bravery, immediately, like we talk about things about, courageous leaders, they are comfortable being uncomfortable, right? They live in the growth zone. So immediately, like that growth mindset really has a play with what does a brave leader do? They
Mm-hmm.
exhibit a growth mindset. We believe that anything's possible. We During talking about bravery, we talked about being courageous enough to make an experience transformational and being courageous enough to do the hard work, not just the easy work. Go past the transaction, hire more than the set of hands, be in it for somebody's career, and like truly be brave enough to lift the people in our work community up when they need to be lifted. Give first without expectations of receipt. It's those conversations we had as we were building that ultimately, we sift out what makes it into the program and what doesn't, and how to build exercises and reflections around it. But I think there was just a lot of value in like even shaping, going from what I think I believe about an idea to really making that concrete. I mean, April, how did you experience that piece of it as we started trying to figure out what these words actually meant to
Yeah.
these leaders?
I think that a lot of self-reflection, that piece was very difficult because we defined our core values. That was one of the activities that we had individuals do, but Kelley and I also had to go through that workbook so that we knew our core values and could define them. And I think that was probably the most difficult. You have to be honest. You can list core values all day, but then you have to move over into what does it look like? How am I putting that into action? I think that was one of the most difficult processes that I went through, just the self-reflection, because you really want filling in the boxes to be easy.
Mm-hmm.
But as we all know with leadership, there isn't a whole lot of things that are easy about it. And you stay in that growth mindset that you always want to be moving and growing and learning. And that's what I found in that particular module of bravery.
Yeah, and I love the conversation we had about sequencing,
Yeah.
because like we were just handed 7 gifts. They didn't tell us what order. They
Mhm.
just said, "Here's the gifts. You have to do them all, but we're not going to instruct you on how to teach them." So, like sifting through that, it was just this idea of okay, love comes first because
Mhm.
nothing else matters until you have that at the core of what we do,
Yeah.
and kind of this idea that decisions made with love in our heart are going to be more effective decisions than that being absent when we make them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start just with this idea, like that's first and foremost, and like carry that with us. And then, April mentioned like that exercise of truth, like utilizing the gift of truth and defining our truth and defining our values, then letting that take us in the bravery.
Mm-hmm.
And like now we got to be brave enough to live those truths
Yeah.
and like show up as the person I believe myself to be. And, in that you find the things that you want to give to other people
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and how you want to interact with the people you're surrounded by and the work that you want to do. And, um, so it starts to show up in ways of respect and,
Mm-hmm.
what praise and appreciations do we want to give out? And, ultimately leading us to live in a more honest way. Maybe it's, maybe we show up as a better citizen or a better leader, and certainly with a servant's heart and humble as we go about our work. I think we landed at a place where it's really if we do everything there, we become wise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I love the way the curriculum is set up because with each teaching or each attribute, you have the emotional side of it. You've got to
Mm-hmm.
dig deep and you've got to really reflect and find out your why and who you are and all those things. But then you have the technical piece that puts framework around that. And now this is how, I can implement this through life.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I mean, this is one reason we love working with tribal nations is because we know that the stickiest, best leadership development programming recognizes that leadership is as much who you are as what you do. And some places push back against that, right? No, tell us what to do. Tell me how to do corrective action well, right? Tell me how to do a talent assessment or succession planning. Okay, well, we can talk about those things, and those are all good things to do. And who we are as we do them, the level of character we exhibit, matters just as much, matters more than us getting the technicals right. And so I know for us, like we're supremely grateful to get the opportunity to really be open and honest about that. And tribal nations are a place where it's natural to say who you are is as important as the technicals that you execute on.
Mhm.
So I'm curious how people receive that. I'm going to go broader with that. As you stepped into the first cohort and these first sessions, What was that like, delivering some of this leadership content in this format? What was some feedback you got? Did you have to adjust anything as you went? Tell us a little bit about, takeaways from delivering the program.
Well, I know that this is my first time that I've ever facilitated a leadership training to that magnitude.
Mm-hmm.
Very passionate about it. It's by culture, so I wanted to make sure that I was presenting it well and honoring the story and being able to just honor Stephanie and Chris and you all who've wrote the curriculum for us so that we could present it. But we did have to adjust some things to make it feel more natural to us and how
Yeah.
we would say things. And I think after the first two modules, we kind of realized and got that down how we needed to present those things
Hmm.
and
And we
Yeah.
broke it up, like
yeah.
usually I took kind of the emotional pieces and worked through those. And April
Mm-hmm.
was beautiful on the kind of the framework, wrapping the framework and tying it all together.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like each class is going to take on its own personality.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And each time we get a new group, we'll have to adjust and
Mhm.
instruct a little bit different. I think we were just super blessed with our first group, and we may have cheated a little bit because we kind of handpicked our
Mhm.
group, but it gave us the opportunity to have, you know, young, brand new leaders, all the way through people that have been with the tribe for 20 years or better in leadership
Mhm.
roles. So it gave a really good perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what was their feedback? They had been, especially those seasoned people, they had
Mhm.
probably been a part of previous versions
Mhm.
of NOAC. So what was their take? What was their feedback?
I think they enjoyed it. They honestly were sad it was over, didn't want to
Mhm.
see the last class
Yeah.
come. I think what they enjoyed the most was just how authentic everyone was. Every time
Mhm.
someone came to the table to learn, um, walls were down and everyone
Mhm.
was just able to just share, share what they're going through at that moment, whatever life is giving them, and how we could tie it back into that particular teaching. I think they really appreciated just the genuineness of everyone in the class.
And I
Yeah.
think that first class, we set the expectation that it's a safe space and what you say in the class stays in the class. If
Mhm.
you want to share a story, you need to get permission. So we set some pretty good boundaries, clear expectations on making it safe for people to share and let those walls fall down.
Mhm.
I've got a question for you, April. Having facilitated a lot of the framework and like really guiding them through the reflections and like the hard work, right? Like
Yeah.
the slugging through the muck.
Hmm.
Um, how, just kind of give me your take on during the program, how did it work balancing traditional cultural elements with like modern leadership practices and theory?
That was very difficult because, like I said, I want to honor the traditions, but
Mhm.
we also need to be able to synthesize those into these frameworks. So I think that Robert and Blake, who did our cultural component, they made it very easy for us to thread that through those frameworks and make the connection. So they really kind of made the connections culturally for us to be able to take those frameworks and people saw the broader picture of how that worked and those how they made sense together.
Yeah. So let's talk about the framework in general for just a moment, just so listeners have an idea of what it was.
Okay.
Because there was some field trips mixed in, there was
Yeah.
classroom work. So give us an idea, like how long was the program in total? How many total sessions? And then maybe walk us through a normal session and how that was set up with culture and language and your guys' piece.
Sure. So there's 10 sessions total. The first one was just like the welcome expectations. And then we talked a lot about sovereignty because I felt like that was kind of the foundation. Um, and then we usually met 2 times a month. The first time we would meet, we would always start with an an enterprise discovery. So one of our enterprises would come in and speak to what they do and how it fits into the bigger picture of things. And we would follow up then with language and a history kind of story or lesson, if you will. And from there, we would move into the curriculum. And that particular class would be about 4 hours. And then 2 weeks later, we would meet again just for a field trip. And the field trips were always, we would get together for lunch, and then we would learn about an enterprise. And then we would repeat. The next class would be, the 4-hour class where we would do the full thing. And then the next one would just be a field trip.
Nice. So about 80 hours in total,
Mm-hmm.
And, the way that spread out, adequate time for reflection, deep learning,
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of the goodness that you look for in a development program. But as the learners were going through the program, there was some kind of a couple special things along the way. And I would love for you guys to talk about kind of the desk item and how you gave recognition from one session to the next and how that process worked.
We had challenge coins developed, created, and so the front of the coin was the particular teaching and the animal associated with that teaching, and on the back was the seal. And so each class, they had a challenge. And when they came back and they'd met that challenge and they shared with the group what they did and where they found their growth, and then they were awarded their coin for their challenge. So at the end of it, the participants would have their set of 7 challenge coins.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah,
That's
and
very
so
cool.
then those would marry up to make a desk presentation.
Mm-hmm.
So you certainly wouldn't want to not have one of your challenge
Right.
Right.
coins.
Yes. You
Right.
don't want
So
an empty
there's,
hole.
it's one of those as educators, sometimes manipulation is not a cuss word,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
but it's
Yeah.
like a meaningful recognition for doing something significant in the program.
Mhm.
And, these were all like earned, like you
Mhm.
you didn't get them for showing up. You
Mm-mm.
got them when you came to the next session and shared your reflection from our, study guide, job aid, from our workbook.
Mhm.
And, so that recognition played a pretty significant piece in this. And then if you don't mind, like talk to me about graduation and how kind of recognition shows up again with this cohort
Mhm.
graduating.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think graduation was my favorite. We made it not super formal, but we had a big sit down lunch. Everyone invited their director and somebody special for them, and then we opened it up to just any director that wanted to come and see what the group had accomplished. But April and I both presented everyone with a certificate of completion. And when we did that, we both shared individually, like what that person had grown to mean to us
Mhm.
and how we saw them grow, and how that affected us watching some of those changes happen. And then we also gave each participant a little trophy. And the trophy, really, we came up with words like, when we think of this particular student, what's the first thing that pops into our mind with this person? Oh, they're so generous. So someone got the most generous award. And then we
Mhm.
told stories about how we came up with that name. So everyone felt very recognized and special. And of course, Mrs. Capps, our vice chairman, was there to join in on the celebrations with them. And she spoke and just really praised each of them for their courage, their bravery to go through the program too, and how proud she was of them.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm curious if you had anyone stand out that you thought, "Oh gosh, this was so fun to watch this growth moment or a story."
Mhm,
You don't have
mhm.
to share their names,
I
right?
will
But
not
any
share
kind
their
of
names.
Yeah.
I
any
will
kind
not
of
share their
stories
name.
of here's some impact that you saw during the
Yes.
course of the program.
Yes. So we had one particular participant that honestly, when she showed interest, I told April, no, I can't. I will not be able to facilitate. I can't. No. And when I tell you that I had to hit my knees and really pray on that one, that is no joke. And it just came to me, and I came to April several days later. I'm like, she's going to be in the class. We're going to figure it out, and she's going to be in the class. And we watched that woman literally tear down walls. I get emotional every time I think about it because we had just a very strong dislike for one another and had butted heads. And I consider her a very close friend now. And to be a witness, to watch
Mm.
those walls come down simply because she believed in this curriculum and she was willing and had the courage to work through it with us. I mean, there was a point in time she would come to my office to have a conversation prior to this, and she wouldn't even have a conversation with April in the room. We would have
Yeah.
to go someplace separate. Like, she had zero trust in us.
Mm.
Mhm.
And just to watch it all come to life and watch that happen was, to me, worth every bit of fight that we put in to make this whole thing happen. Yeah.
Wow.
And so her trophy that we gave her was the Wall of Jericho,
Hmm.
because those walls came down and she knew they needed to come down. She was
Hmm.
resistant, but she knew to find her good, those walls had to come down.
And man, what a beautiful soul. And to get the pat on the back and for her to come into the office now and talk to me, I feel like we really accomplished something. Yeah, I don't want to cry, but the second module in, when we had train the trainer, I said, we can't do this. We can't help her. And man, she put in the hard work. And I think that is probably someone that I've grown to really love to talk to. She's funny. She's amazing. So yeah, Walls of
Mhm.
Jericho.
Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
love that.
Yeah.
So thinking about, your guys, like your why, how does kind of having this program be part of you and part of the story that you're creating here at CPN? How does it reflect your personal purpose and what you ultimately want to bring to this organization?
Wow, that's a good question. I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to grow. I just knew growth was happening. Sometimes it was very uncomfortable because I can be a little bit like the other participant, and I didn't know it with the walls,
Mhm.
the walls up. I think that this first time facilitating, it actually has made me feel closer to my heritage. So while I learned how to facilitate and kind of find my way, it really has drawn me closer to my heritage and those stories. I'm even taking a language class with one of the cultural teachers that came in and helped with the language portion. So yeah, it's drawn me closer to my heritage. So I'm really excited to see what this next cohort looks like for me.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
Yeah.
Kelly, how about you?
Yeah. And for me, it is just a huge honor to be a non-native, but find so much belief from Mrs. Cap's belief in me
Mm.
to move forward and carry this big, huge tradition forward. I just find that such an honor, and I think that's my why. Every day is my why, is how can I honor this tribe as a non-native and not disappoint, you know?
Mhm.
I want April to grow closer to her heritage, and I want to learn from that and just feel so, I think, thankful, grateful, blessed that I'm able to leave a footprint behind here and become part of the tribe's culture without even being native.
Yeah. And, we always talk about a transformational change in any organization starts with the courage of one person,
Yeah.
somebody deciding to take an action because they believe that tomorrow can be better and they see an opportunity to make that so. Um, Kelly, April, what advice would you give like to other leaders in tribal organizations who might be in a similar situation? They see a program that might be a copy of a copy or something where we
Mhm.
might start checking boxes.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, we did it. We got 300 people trained, Like when it gets to that point, like what advice do you give that leader or that director that's staring at kind of a big rock to move, but
Mhm.
something that might need to be done?
Mhm. I mean, it is a big rock to move, and you do that one little pebble at a time, right? Until you get that big rock moved. Investing in your people um, can be slow. You don't
Hmm.
just dump it on them. It's the investment of time is what it is, and through time is where you find the changes. And we've had some obstacles with this. Even some people don't believe in it, don't think it's necessary, don't have the buy-in. Um, but when you sit in the room with those 10 or 12 participants and you see the changes, right? They're big changes that come in that room, and they take them out of that room and start to make those little changes. And that's when you see that boulder getting moved. So I would say have the courage to start small.
You bet.
Just lean into it. Even when it's tough, take that moment, maybe find a support person that you can vent to, and find the strength to keep leaning into it. It's hard, but when you raised your hand to be a leader, no one said it was going to be easy.
Hmm.
So,
Well, and to carry that on, we can't have 100 leaders that are intense about our values until we have 5.
yeah.
Hmm.
Before there's 10, we can't have 100.
Yes.
And there's something really special that happens in that room when this group is doing all the hard work. And the naysayers and the cynics that want to kill the hope, right? They're, don't let the fixed mindset snuff out the ones with the growth mindsets, because the sustainability and the vibrance of our organization relies on growth mindsets and people willing to do the hard work. That's what's ironic. The sustainability and vibrance of the organization is not reliant on the cynic or the fixed mindset leader. Their life doesn't change. So please stay out of the way and let these other leaders develop.
Hmm.
If you don't want to participate, that's fine. But don't hold other people back, and
Hmm.
don't hold the organization back, and allow us to forge as a community.
I think it's really cool to be having this conversation here in this cultural center. And I'm just looking around at artifacts or reproductions of maybe the way things were in 1700. And this is what these values looked like 300 years ago,
Hmm.
right? Here's maybe some behaviors, some way that it looked in the community, some structures that came out of these values. And here we are 300 years later, and you are creating how these values look today.
Hmm.
And I'm just imagining this cultural center in 100 years or 300 years, and something that says, here's what these 7 pieces of wisdom, these 7 gifts, here's how the tribal community lived those out in 2024. And I say that for listeners too, to say, if you're a leader in whatever context, right, in a tribal nation or in any other organization, like, you are deciding every day, whether you're deciding it on purpose or not, with intention or not is maybe another thing, but you are deciding every day how you're choosing to live your values out right now. And 300 years from now, someone could look back and say, here's how these values showed up. Maybe they were intentional, maybe they weren't, but here were the fruit of the values that showed up every day. So I just want to thank you all for being intentional about it. And then, as you were sharing the story about change you saw in a difficult participant, um, I was getting a little emotional too, and I didn't talk for a while because I'm just thinking about how grateful I am to get to be a tiny little part of this, right? That our team at Purpose and Performance Group is able to be a tiny part because you allowed us to fulfill our purpose. So our purpose, the reason our team does what we do, we say, is to help build thriving communities by activating shared purpose. And what you describe in that life change, like, that is the type of transformational change that happens in a thriving community.
Mhm.
And how did you do it? You activated your values and your shared purpose, like really operationalized and activated it. So I don't know. I'm humbled and grateful. Okay. So with that, what's next? So nothing changes in a set, right? You don't want to, do a copy of a copy of a copy for the next cohort. You want to keep moving things forward.
Mhm.
What are you going to change? What's next? Or if it's outside of this program and you're like, hey, we're going to do it a few more times. What else are you doing around employee engagement that you're like, this is our next mountain to climb?
Mhm.
Mhm.
I feel like we have a lot of mountains to climb.
Yep.
And we start out with the small hills, and we do things like longevity luncheons to honor our employees for their time here with CPN. We do things like send all of our employees birthday cards each month that are handwritten and designed with stickers and stamps by April and I. We mail those out every month. We do small hills. We have chili cook-offs. Um, Long term, really, what I would love to see is a true employee recognition program
Uh-huh.
based off of these 7 grandfathers,
Mhm.
so that when you're going to reward an employee for something or honor them for something, that it's tied back to one of
Mhm.
these gifts, one of these attributes, and it really has meaning for it.
Yeah.
I love that. Just to nerd out on that, right? Whenever we do that, it both activates and operationalizes the value so everyone sees what it means
Mhm.
behaviorally. This
Mhm.
is what it looks like when we
Mhm.
live out this value. And really good recognition is not for behaviors necessarily, it's for motivations, it's for shared values. And so it also gets you away from I think a top salesperson, right? You
Mhm.
got the
Mhm.
most quantifiable result in some sort of metric. It's you believed this, your character is this, and that's what we're recognizing. And that's super motivating for
Mhm.
people. So
Yeah.
So,
love that.
April, were you excited to see it go?
Well, Kelley might get me for this, but I would love to see. Um, we have NOAC leadership, but we've talked about having maybe more of a skills type program where
Hmm.
we teach things like customer service so that it's kind of the prequel to what you would get if you go through this program. Then you could also go to NOAC and expand on those skills and learn
Mhm.
more about leadership. So,
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we've already named it the Employee Success Program, and we
Yeah.
already have, like sketched out what we would include in that and what that might look like.
Yeah.
But we're a department of 2.
Yeah.
We have the heart and soul of 22, but
Yeah.
it is just April and I. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, but that's what's beautiful about it is like you've started,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the win. Like there's stories being written, hills then mountains.
Mhm.
But I just appreciate the courage of you all to see this as an opportunity and seize on that, to believe that, this program can be better, tomorrow can be better. More informed, effective leaders make that so, and here's a path that can be activated and lit for our emerging leaders of tomorrow. So I just want to recognize you all for being the kind of leaders that model the way, not just in this organization, but for other directors of other departments that are in similar situations. So thank you for that. And from my position, just thank you for the opportunity to do something super meaningful and something that, I'm certain that I learned as much in our building process than any learner that went through the actual program. So I appreciate that opportunity a lot, and am certainly a, a more informed, iterated, different person, right, as a result of going through this process.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely feel that same way,
Yeah.
Chris. I think, timing has to be right, and God puts people in your path for a reason. And I'm just so thankful that you came into our path that day at OK Ethics, right?
Yeah.
And we've been able to work together because I know I have grown. Um, as well through this process and have walked away a different person than when we started this development ever how many months ago. Yeah.
And that's really the whole notion of this podcast is like, man, when aligned people start doing work together, really great things happen.
I agree.
So thank you all.
Kelley and April, if people want to find you, where can they look you up?
The website, Potawatomi Nation website will have our contact information, but Kelley Francen at Potawatomi.org.
Yeah. April.carter@Potawatomi.org.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your partnership and for doing really meaningful, impactful work.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us
Yes.
today. It's been great fun.
Yeah. For Chris and I, you can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com. We're on LinkedIn, all the socials. You can find us there.
Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group, recorded live here in Shawnee, Oklahoma at the Citizen Potawatomi Cultural Heritage Center. Our intro music is by Evan Grimm. You can find all of his music on Apple Music. And make sure to check us out. All the previous episodes and downloads at magicintheroom.com.